Hello there, and welcome to the ship section of the 2.0 dev server, its first iteration, and everything is subject to change. All the content that probably will come with this patch is not on the first iteration. Take everything with a grain of salt. As I just said, this is now the ship section. I already made a quick vehicle preview about the tanks and planes. So if you want to check that video out, I think the link will be in the video description down below. Without further ado, let's talk about the ships. And the first big change is the split of the tech trees. If that is good or bad, we'll have to see. However, we can see here that we have the blue water fleet and the coastal fleet. The coastal fleet has all the low-ranking patrol boats, rank 1 and 2 of the current live server, and it now ranges from reserve to battle rating 3.3 here, for example, for the US. I'm not quite sure if this is a good change, because there is no real change to the maximum battle rating. And if you have, for example, here the cruiser, the USS Helena, as your only premium, you cannot research the coastal fleet ships with it, which is just an absolute cash grab, money grab, and I absolutely don't think that this is good. If you indeed cannot distribute your research points between this tech tree and that tech tree, which, to be honest, I mean, you can't research planes with helicopters or tanks with planes, can you? I mean, you can play them together in lineups, but not research them vice versa. So that is also a bit of a caveat, since the battle rating for destroyers, the lowest, is now 3.3. It's not 1.0. That makes me sad, because this is a big wasted chance of doing a massive decompression, because here the battle rating ends with 6.0 with the new Dreadnought battleships. But everything is subject to change. Now let's have a look at the ships. Let's begin with here this beautiful hangar lighting with the new cloud effects, etc. With the New Orleans CA-32, it is a ship from 1945. It has improved AA. You can see here all the quad 40mm, 6 positions, 14 twin 20mm olicons, 8 5-inch single mountings, and then obviously in 3 triple turrets, 8-inch 55 Mark 14 cannons. So the readout is still a hefty 17.1 seconds. On the other hand, you kind of have here some decent shells. I just go over them relatively quickly. You can pause the video at any point and just look at the various different modules. I obviously also went through the effort of trying to upgrade all the ships with 1 or 2 exceptions. Then obviously we come to the USS Wellborn DD-159. It's your typical for all nations battle rating 3.3 rank 1 premium destroyer. It's not worth it. It's more of a collector's thing. I think it costs 250 golden eagles. Then the USS Moffett DD-362 is also a very powerful destroyer, but it kind of falls out of the interesting line, since it isn't at the top rank premium for the blue water fleet. Armor, X-ray, your usual 5-inch 38 Mark 12 cannons. A lot of deck, I think 2.8 second reload, really good. Then another change is that the USS Helena, like all the rank 4 premium cruisers, has now a 2.8 times 2.0 Silverline modifier, which doubles effectively for realistic battles the Silverline income for those premium cruisers, which is a very much needed and very welcome change. Then we also come to the North Dakota. Finally, we're talking here about Dreadnoughts, and I think it's beautiful. I think art department really carried, and I think I want to use here the sunset with those beautiful clouds to just look at this ship. And I hope that you can see it. The new hangar is, or the new harbor in this case, is also much more appropriate. So what we are talking about is 10 12-inch 45 Mark V cannons, and also lots of secondaries, but the AA is all but existent. Let's have a look at the shells, shall we? So we have no HE shells for the 12-inch guns, and the AP is with 487, pretty decent, and just under 12 kilograms of bursting charge. However, at 10 kilometers it is 281 millimeters for the AP round, so it has no cap, no ballistic cap whatsoever. The secondaries only have a base use or a common shell, I think it's then SEP, and also an APC round. Funnily enough, it also has torpedoes. Where are the torpedoes, you might ask? Glad you asked. Let's have a look at the armor, and we can see that from the front we have 228 and 254 millimeters, and for the barbettes of the turrets 254 millimeters, and for the turret faces 305 millimeters. At the waterline, the belt is 280 millimeters, the upper belt is 254 millimeters, and in the upper belt, if you will, 227 millimeters, with a 38 millimeter deck plating, and above the magazines 51. So that is a little bit of an all or nothing armor scheme. Here at the stern we have hints of a turtleback. If you remove the external armor, there are only the coal bunkers that will help the ship to absorb a little bit more punishment. 1 feet of coal equals 1 inch of armor is the calculation. So 1 feet is roughly a meter, 1 inch is roughly 2.5 centimeters. It is a bit of an additional help. It absorbs definitely some fragments. We will see how this is trolling with the armor penetration calculations. Then the X-ray reveals that there is lots and lots of armor at waterline, so those ships might be a bit of a glass cannon thing. Then we also have torpedo tubes, and they get fired here to each side of the ship, so to the left and to the right, and you then can reload them. Very interesting for close quarters because they're relatively slow and have a relatively short range. Moving on to Germany, and we begin with the Type 1924 Iltis 3.7, bit higher battle rating for the entry premium ship because it has no 4-inch guns, but more or less 5-inch guns, the 12.7 centimeter or 128 millimeter SKC 34. We have a very similar tech tree ship, the Leopard. So with a battle rating of 3.7, it's counted as reserve. Not really that good of a grinding machine. And I think, again, here we can observe the Prinz Eugen with the 2.8 times 2.0 Silverline modifier at the very bottom of the stat card. Then we have here a very interesting line, because from the Admiral Hippe it goes to the SMS Westfalen and not from the Graf Spee. The Graf Spee is a very interesting point, though. We will see this later on, because when we go to the Westfalen, the SMS Westfalen, battle rating 6.0, it has 12 11-inch guns or 283 millimeters in a very unusual hexagonal layout. So that means that we have the disadvantage of having a maximum broadside of only 8 guns, whereas we have overall 12. But it has a little bit of an advantage with the wing-mounted turrets of having a forward firepower of 6 guns, which is currently the joint best in the game with the Helgoland. However, let's have a look at the armor, and we can see a massive icebreaker, 120 for the lower and 90 for the upper icebreaker. Then we have 170 millimeter for the second belt, and the primary belt has 290 millimeters. We also have some coal bunkers, and then we have some deck plating of 80 millimeters, 55 millimeters and 80 millimeters. And this 80 millimeter is actually the turtleback, so that is very interesting. So a shell, in order to penetrate really here the citadel, needs to go through the lower or the upper belt and then punch through the angled 80 millimeters. It will lose a lot of penetration by punching through the belt, and then it bounces upwards in the superstructure where it does a lot of less damage. If 80 millimeters is sufficient to deal with battleship grade guns, we'll see, but technically there are some very interesting mechanics, like some of the Italian battleships had some idea of spaced armor to decap and make the battleship shell tumble. This is also an effect that you can expect from this very steeply angled turtleback, I guess. If Gage implements that is another question though. Now the X-ray reveals that the magazines are partially above the waterline, but again I hope that the turtleback protects them quite nicely. And again, here we have for the barbettes 11-inch of rolled cemented armor, which is a bit tougher than your normal Joe average rolled homogeneous armor. Now here we have a look at the shells. So we have base fuse high explosive with 17 kilograms of bursting charge, and the AP, the 183 millimeter Panzersprengranate, I guess it is called, translated as an APC round, with 469. So that is kind of reaching the level of the American 12-inch guns, and we have just under 9 kilograms of TNT bursting charge. The secondaries have nose fuse high explosive shell, which is not really that great if you look at the bursting charge, only 1.6 kilograms, and 150 millimeter Sprenggranate with or semi-armor piercing, in this case SEP shell, but it should be a base fuse, Sprenggranate mit Bodenzünder, that's how it is translated, with 1.05 kilograms. The 88 contact fuse HE shell, and some of them are also double functioning as anti-aircraft guns, those 4 here, but that's not really good. The SMS Helgoland is a very similar looking ship, but it's a completely different beast. First of all, the similarity is the hexagonal shape of the 12-inch guns, and also we have then better armor. Look at this. So that is 120 millimeter for the icebreaker, and then we have a much thicker 300 millimeter belt, which is also longer, and the upper belt is 170 millimeters, and the upper belt, so to speak, is 90 millimeters, and on the rear again 120 millimeter and 100 millimeter belt for under the waterline. Then we have a 40 millimeter deck plating, and this is very, very interesting. The turtleback is a massive 210 millimeters, vastly superior to the SMS Westfalen. So that allows you to really absorb the punishment. Then we have a 210 millimeter front belt before the 300 barbette armor, and also 300 rolled cemented armor for the turret faces. In theory, plunging fire might get through the 70 millimeter deck plating, but we'll see. That's for the turrets. So what this makes the ship is an absolute massive bow-in monster. The icebreaker will bounce most of the shells, and then you only have here this 200 millimeter, 210 millimeter strip of armor with this 300 millimeter barbette armor, and it's well rounded. The same goes for the turret fronts. So this might offset here the weakness in terms of overall numbers for the broadside. The only weakness is here this very weak 40 millimeter strip of armor here. That might be a shell catcher, and that then obviously goes directly into the ammo rack, which is not healthy for the life expectancy of the ship. Here we also have some coal bunkers, and then we have overall 10 torpedo tubes. So there are 2 to the left and 2 to the right, 1 firing through the front. Then we also have 2 torpedo tubes on each rear end of the ship, and also 1 through the stern. So this is an armored behemoth, and also the shells, 27 kilograms on the base fuse high explosive, and the armor piercing for the 12-inch, although only being APC, has at 1,000 meters 507 millimeters of penetration with a just under 14 kilogram heavy bursting charge. And those torpedoes are also not slow and don't have the greatest range, a bit further than the Americans, I think. The secondaries, the heavy at least, are HE and SEP, and some of the 88 millimeters are also double functioning as AA guns. However, they only have base nose fuse high explosive, so they need a direct hit, which is very unlikely, very weak AA. So if we compare this to the Graf Spee, we have here 23.3 kilograms, and here just under 8 kilograms of bursting charge, but much higher penetration with 538 millimeters, which it also keeps better at range because it's an APCBC round with all the capping. The funny thing here is, and I have not mentioned this, the Graf Spee has a reload of 24.4 seconds, if I remember correctly, and the Helgoland as well as the Westfalen have both 20-second reload. So that offsets here the lack of guns and equalizes kind of the DPM. Now let's come to the Soviets, and we begin with the Kerch, which is more or less like a premium Frunze. I really like the skin here, I really do, but it's not worth as a premium. Then we have the premium cruiser. I have really my problems pronouncing that one. Zelensnyakov. Zelensnyakov. And if this ship looks very familiar, in the tech tree you can see highest civil line modifier, and then it's more or less the Chapayev or the Sverdlov. If you want to buy yourself a light cruiser to fight dreadnoughts, I have my doubts. I mean, the armor could be worse, 100 millimeter, and the front is also 100 millimeter, bit of a light icebreaker, 130 millimeter for the barbette, 175 for the turret faces. Good AA because proximity fuse shells, which is nice. Also for 6-inch guns, that's not bad at all. But you know, you get shot at by a caliber that is literally twice the size of your main guns. So I would be careful. I think the Maxim Gorky might be worth a talisman a bit more than usual, right? Then we also have here ending both lines of the Blue Water Fleet with a Dreadnought each. The Poltava is the first one that I want to have a look at, and they have 12-inch guns in 4 triple turrets, and they can bring all 12 guns to bear on the enemy, which is really nice. Then we have a 225 millimeter overall strip of rolled homogeneous armor with a 125 millimeter icebreaker, upper icebreaker 75 millimeter, deck plating being 37.5 millimeters. Turret face is 8-inch. The funny thing is that the rear of the turret, as we can see here, is 305 millimeter. It's probably a counterweight, and the effective thickness, because this is flat whereas the 8-inch turret front is angled, is roughly the same. So if we go here just straight up, it's a bit less still, but anyway, the upper belt is 125 millimeters. If we remove the external armor, we see a turtleback, but that is much thinner than on both German ships, and it's also much less angled. So this is a roughly 45-degree angle, and there's also not the best bulkhead protection ever. So that is rather lackluster. Barbette armor is here the 150, 200 millimeters down to 75 millimeters for the turret barbettes. The X-ray reveals that the magazines are just below the waterline, but still we will see how those things fare. And also there are overall a lot of fuel tanks and coal bunkers. The reload on those ships is then 33.3. So a bit less, a bit more, roughly 10% more than the US battleship, and yeah, 13 seconds more than the German battleships. The shells though, this is very interesting. First of all, we have here HE shells with a whopping 47.5 kilograms of high explosive charge. That is literally a small bomb. Then the 12-inch AP is an APCBC round, so it has 520 millimeters and keeps it up to 341 millimeters at 10 kilometers range. 341 millimeters with just under 13 kilograms of bursting charge. But the SAP shell is really the interesting one. 55 kilograms of bursting charge and still 390 millimeters of penetration, and 1000 meters still 245 millimeters. Versus heavy cruisers, that is absolutely devastating. That really delivers the damage. The secondaries, 120 millimeter guns, 3.2 kilograms for the HE and 3.7 for the SAP shell. The torpedoes are a bit faster and a bit further range than the German ones, and you have 12 of them. So this is more or less, I could summarize it as a glass cannon. And the torpedo tubes, the question is, where are they? To be honest, I think I'm blind. Yeah, well, I think I'm blind. The AA on this ship is also with only two 75 millimeter and one 3-pounder Hodgkin gun on the top of the turret. Not really that amazing. I have no idea how you pronounce that. Imperatrista Maria, I guess. Same guns, same broadside, 12 guns, same reload, but the armor is a bit better organized. I think 262.5 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor, icebreaker 125, upper icebreaker 75, upper belt is 100 millimeters. We also have some coal bunkers on the rear. The ship is not that well protected. Deck plating 37.5. Same armor layout on the turrets, 8 inches all around, and on the rear 12 inches of armor. And if we remove the external armor, we also have a turtleback which has the same arrangement with some additional coal bunkers. So there is that. The X-ray is then the same. The magazines are just on the waterline, actually above. And I doubt that the turtleback will effectively protect it. So again, also a glass cannon. And here we can see the torpedo tubes. So I guess it's very similar on the Poltava. Then let's come to Great Britain. And let's begin with the Montgomery G95, 3.3 premium destroyer. Not really worth it. Collector's item, yeah. Then we have the Garland H37, a bit better as an offering, but still not, despite being a G-class, I guess. No, H37, I'm confused. This ship is not really the greatest premium. The J-class, on the other hand, is the flotilla leader, which has an impressive array of 4.7-inch guns. Bit of a better premium, but again, if you look into the tech tree, the HMS Belfast might be just a better premium, and maybe you were one of the lucky ones that put a talisman in the HMS Tiger. Then we come actually again to the end of the line. We have the HMS Dreadnought after the HMS Kent, and the HMS Colossus after the HMS London. So this is probably an idea to put a few more points of research into that aspect. Let's start with the HMS Dreadnought. Quite literally, it is the iconic ship of this patch because it's the first of the Dreadnoughts. It has a broadside of 8 12-inch guns, and let's have a look at the armor, because here we have 280 millimeter of rolled cemented armor just below the waterline. At the waterline, we have 203 millimeter of rolled cemented armor, and we have an icebreaker of 152.4 millimeters. Above the waterline, a deck plating of 19.05. I have no idea how this will stand up to any sort of just a hinge of plunging fire. The barbettes are 203.2, and the turret faces and all around 280 millimeter. So that is overall pretty decent, with the stern also having 102 millimeters of protection. The funky thing is here that this British ship also has a turtleback under the waterline, 70 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. So this is definitely better than the Soviet ships, or the at that point I think they weren't Soviet, the Russian ships, let's call them that one. So there is also here a little bit of the nice protection if you go bow in, so this will not punch clean through here a flat armor plating, but has to go through an angled 102 millimeter plating. The base of the barbette is 8 inches and 102 millimeters from the rear, and 280 millimeters from the front, and from the rear it is as well 203 millimeters. So pretty tough nut to crack, I think. The X-ray reveals that the magazines are way below the waterline, and we also have some torpedo tubes, so one to each side. They are also roughly in the same region of capabilities, and a lot of coal bunkers, so this will be very interesting, with the AA being all but existent. In fact, it has also the weakest secondaries with only 3-inch guns, and the reload on the HMS Dreadnought, believe it or not, is a hefty 40 seconds. So when it comes to the broadside firepower and overall DPM, it's so far the worst ship. And I don't know if you can fight head-on with the 6-inch broadside like with the Germans. I don't see it quite here yet. I mean, you can nicely angle for the 2 forward turrets, but then that's about it. So we'll have to see how this stacks up in an actual gunfight. But then we have the HMS Col. Oh, what I forgot is obviously the shells. HE shells, 53 kilograms on the HE, and with 476 millimeters of penetration on the APC round, you carry a 12.4 kilogram bursting charge with you. And then this is listed as a 4-inch gun, but then it's 76 millimeters. I'm slightly confused, but anyway, we'll have to see how this will be polished out by Gaijin. Then we come to the HMS Colossus, also 10 12-inch guns, but a very unique turret layout. The wing turrets are able to fire cross deck, so you have some echelon arrangement, and so you actually have a 10 gun broadside. So with some limited angling, of course, so because this turret can actually rotate below this rescue boat bridge, if you will, and this one fires through that gap. But you can see the firing angles are kind of limited, although that's quite okay. Its armor layout is very nice indeed as well, very similar to an 80mm for the belt that is actually at the waterline. The upper belt 203.2mm, bit more distributed armor scheme, and here the front upper belt is 178mm. Turret barbettes 254 all around, and the turret face is 280mm. Deck plating is 38.1. If we remove then the external armor, oops, wrong button, sorry, we can see that there is also a very shallow turtleback, but it just doesn't end quite at the waterline, I think. It's pretty difficult to see here, but it's also only 44.5mm. Then there are also some coal bunkers, and if we then go to the X-ray, we can see that again the magazines are way below the waterline. So even if you punch through the belt and the turtleback, the shrapnels also still have to go all the way down. And we also then have 14 21-inch Mark I torpedoes. So that is quite a lot of torpedo firepower, although only 2 torpedo tubes, which have to be reloaded individually for individual shots. And also the AA looks quite lacking, although here I think it's correctly mentioned with 13 4-inch guns and a single 76mm gun. Yeah, that is some terrifying AA, let me tell you that for free. Then we come to Japan. We begin with the IJN Satsuki. Again, low tier premium, not really worth it. And then if we then look at the line, this is different from the British, as we will reach the battleships after the IJN Tournée and after the Mogami. Currently there is no follow-up. The 2 Dreadnoughts, if we can call them, are the IJN Ikoma, which has the lowest battle rating of 5.7, and the reason for that is that it only has 4 12-inch guns in 2 twin turrets, one in the rear and one on the side. Looks a bit like if a hotel goes to war. So the armor is a bit weird. Lower belt is 178mm, upper belt 127mm, not really impressive. And here is absolutely no real armor protection. We have multiple decks of 38mm, 3 decks I can see. We have then for the barbettes 178mm, for the turret front 244, and a little bit of an icebreaker of 102mm. The external armor reveals a 51mm turtleback below the waterline actually, and also not as well angled as with the German Dreadnoughts. So that also looks a little bit like a glass cannon, and the crew tells us that it has a reload of 30 seconds. If we have then a look at the shells, well, the 12-inch has a respectable 38 kilograms of TNT equivalent bursting charge, which results in 89mm of penetration. And the 12-inch has 486mm of penetration for a 400 kilogram heavy warhead, which is quite a lot, and a 12.4 kilogram heavy warhead. And the 6-inch has both IHE and APC rounds. Again, no AA, although, you know, terrifying 2-3 pounder QF Hodgkins guns. Yes. The IJN Setsu looks significantly more like the German Dreadnoughts with the hexagonal layout. So again, in this case, 8-gun broadside, and you can definitely fire head-on 6 as well as to the rear. What about the armor? The armor is 305mm, so that is definitely better, with the icebreaker being 127mm, semi-icebreaker of 75mm, which is quite thick deck plating, to be honest. And upper belt is 228mm. Upper belt, where the secondary battery is, we have 152mm of rolled cemented armor, with the barbette being 280 or 254mm, and the turrets have all around 279mm of protection. And then we have, if you remove this, not really a turtleback, yeah, I can't see it here, but a lot of coal bunkers. We will see how that screws with the penetration mechanics. And the magazines for the front turret are way below the waterline, but for the wing turrets it's just at the waterline, same goes for the rear turrets. And yeah, that then leaves us with only one final thing. For the brave of you, Italy gets the Aquilone again as a low tier ship. It has a very, very nice skin though, but again, not worth it. For the very great fans of this channel, we have one final cherry on top of the naval cake. And that is, we go to the Harrier, and then we go to a test flight. There we go. And we can see then, as you will see in just a few seconds, one of the new carriers. So that is one of the new carriers. In this case, it's the British one. I think it's called the Ark Royal, in honor of the World War II Ark Royal. Let's just quickly start with the Harrier, by the way. No, I just used the catapult start because I'm lazy. And you can see that it's quite a brick at this speed, but man, does it look gorgeous. By the way, there is a nice little bug here with the rockets. They just disappear after a while completely, but they're still there, as you could see with the impact. Very appropriate music here. Anyway, there is one funny little thing that I want to demonstrate, which is also one of those funny dev server bugs. If you go to Germany and the SMS Westfalen, we can see that the weather has changed, yes, and that we can click here on this ship just in the harbor. And if we then go to where the Dreadnought is and we just click, did you see it in the stat card? The civil line calculation hops. I think that's funny. And with this bombshell of a bug, that's it for me today. I have kind of made a very quick review of every ship. I might do a little bit of a stat compilation or just write them together for my own amusement. And yeah, having said this, that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you found this video funny, entertaining and educative. And if so, why not give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the waves of War Thunder.